Hi, good afternoon, everyone. We're really excited to have a new idea that we're trying out, and we're interviewing some of our friends and neighbors and some really cool people that we want you to all meet. And today is our first one, and we'd like to introduce Shel Kahn. She's with the Comic Book Embassy, actually a neighbor of ours on Spadina Avenue. And she's here we're just going to have a chat and talk about some of the things that you do and some things that we think that our audience would find interesting.
Sure. Awesome.
So, first question, I know it's an obvious one, but I think some of our customers would like to know, so tell us about yourself.
Sure. I'm an illustrator. I started off illustrating for tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons, Call of Cthulhu, a lot of small indie games. I've moved into using tabletop role-playing games as an educator, but on the side I also make my own comics and teach comics as well. So I'm educating with games and comics and making a lot of art and self-publishing.
Wow. So that sounds like a 24/7 kind of a job. Not really a job. I don't know if you'd call it a job.
It's definitely a vocation, or 4 or 5 vocations.
Wow. Which is your favorite?
If I had a favorite, I don't think I'd be doing 6 different things.
Well, that's pretty good. Okay, well let me think. So you said you're an educator.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell me about that? What is it that you do? What's your favorite part? What inspires you to do it?
I really love using things like art and games to help people become comfortable expressing themselves and to build visual literacy, because I think visual literacy is something we don't get a lot in our standard education, and it's really helpful as a person who wants to make art, but it's also a really great skill for anybody that wants to understand all of the images that are coming at us through digital media, on billboards, everywhere. So for me, being able to teach art and help folks get critical of the images they're seeing and get intentional about the images they make is really exciting.
That's great. So, wow, there were so many things I wanted to ask you about what you just said. What age group is your favorite? Or do you have a favorite, or doesn't?
I've had the good luck to teach from age 7 to adults, and it's been a lot of fun in each different scenario. I recently ran a workshop at Shel Kahn in Kingston, where it was sort of families come and I'll walk you through drawing your Dungeons & Dragons character. And so that meant we had kids, 7 years old doing their Dungeons & Dragons character, and we had their parents,
wow,
middle-aged, also drawing their Dungeons & Dragons characters.
Wow. And what, so you said you're also an illustrator. What medium do you like to use?
On the theme of not being able to choose anything, I really enjoy watercolor. I love working in pencil. I love digital. I've been getting into gouache. Don't really have a favorite.
Okay, all right.
I feel like it cycles. If I can paint outside, I want to paint on paper.
Sure.
If I'm inside, I want to be on a computer screen.
Oh, great. And what do you find that the kids like to do? What type of, or does it depend on what they're going to be drawing that will tell them what kind of medium that they want to use?
I think the secret to getting kids, especially kids who are sort of hesitant or who've already become kind of nervous about making art, to get them invested is to let them try a bunch of different media. Because I think the way that you think when you're holding a pencil is really different from the way that you think when you're holding a paintbrush or a piece of chalk pastel.
Yeah.
And so I found that when I have students who are feeling really blocked or really frustrated, letting them put down the pencil, put away the eraser, and getting out something that's intentionally maybe kind of messy and colorful, like pastels or poster paints, lets them focus on a whole different side of the art making process. And that's always really exciting to watch them sort of like realize, like, oh, I don't have to worry about drawing anything representational. Today we're just going to find out what happens when I put a big pile of red next to a big pile of yellow, next to a big pile of purple. What does it look like? How do I feel about it?
Yeah, that's sort of like what we like to tell people too.
Yeah.
Right, because sometimes if they're told that they have to use that particular pen, they get really nervous about it. Oh, I like that. We have to pass that on more often, I think.
It helps me when I hit a block as well to be like, all right, put down the computer tablet and go and pick up a paintbrush or work on a big thing instead of a little thing, or vice versa.
So let me ask you a couple things about yourself. You said you started off as an illustrator. How did it evolve that you moved into the gaming?
So I had the really good luck of going on a train trip in my mid-20s from Portland, Oregon to Chicago.
Okay.
And when I got on that train, we picked up a train from Seattle, and then our train got stopped in Wyoming, I think, Wyoming, and we were there for about 12 hours.
Oh.
And I got really bored because it was me, so like maybe 25, and then a whole bunch of Boy Scouts we had just picked up, and I couldn't find anyone else my age to talk to. And I went into the cafe car, and I found 4 dudes, maybe 5 years older than me at most, and they were wearing shirts with like webcomic things on them that I recognized. And I was like, we're going to be friends. This is the solution to my problem. And I sat down and I introduced myself and asked them what they were doing, and they were setting up this thing on the table, and they're like, oh, we're going to be playing some Dungeons and Dragons. And I'd never played at that point. And I sort of asked them, can I join in, please? I'm so bored. And they taught me how to play Dungeons and Dragons. And it turned out they were Dungeons and Dragons game designers taking it to a convention. And they really encouraged me to keep playing it. And they, I was in school for illustration at the time, and they said, well, this is a great field for illustrators, all the different things you can draw. It's just really fun and exciting, and it's changing really quickly. So when I got back to Toronto, I asked a friend, I think I really like playing games, and I think I might want to work in games. And he recommended that I join him in a local designers playtest group. So there's a game designer in Toronto named Robin Laws. And Robin invited me into his playtest group, and then has been amazing at just sort of opening the doors for me to work in the industry. So actually, it's very much that I was an illustrator who started working in games by playing games. And then once you've played games for a while, you get excited to play them with new people.
Right. And doesn't that also inspire you to create new characters and
Absolutely.
Move further afield?
You get more and more into them. There's so many games out there now, and as an illustrator, it's so fun to play something that's a high fantasy game and think about all that imagery, and then go play like a horror scenario and think about all of that imagery, or a sci-fi scenario, or a 1920s mystery.
So have you also created your own games and then gone from start to finish, where you start with the drawing and then moved into the actual?
Well, that's what these are.
Okay.
So
well, why don't we talk about those then?
So I like games so much, I started making things myself, and so these are my 2 pocket dungeon packs. They are modules that you could play with a game like Dungeons and Dragons, so they're not a standalone game. You need an existing game to work, but they're pretty flexible. They'll work with whatever you're playing. And what they are is they're a custom pouch, and in that pouch you've got a zine, little pamphlet, and that zine has all the information that you need as the person running the game to send people through the scenario. And this one's a mystery with a haunted island, so you can go to the island. And then also in the pouch, we've got the map of the island.
Do you want me to hold something?
Sure, can you hold the pouch? Sure, thank you. So, this is a large map I made, and this is the island that you explore, and the way you explore it is with 12 little hexes, which you then sit on the map as you go around, and each of them has a number on the back that corresponds to some piece of gameplay. So this was something that I sort of came up with to play with my friends, and I just got really carried away. I like making products. I enjoy putting products together, and I thought this would be fun, and it turned out that people have really liked them, so I've been keeping it in print. I just put in another order for a batch of them for sort of the upcoming convention season.
Great.
And I've got, this one's a little bit smaller, and I'm working on my 3rd actual pocket dungeon pack. So yeah, that is what I do when I get
in your spare
super
time.
extra. Yeah.
And so when you're creating, let's say, something like this where it's an expansion, what kind of amount of time does it take to do it? Or is it a labor of love that you have no time restraint on it?
I try and focus on done is better than perfect, even with my self-published stuff, because it's really easy to get into the fiddly polish and never ever put something out. So the reason that they're little zines that are just staple bound in black and white is because then I sort of tap into that zine mindset of not worrying too much about the details or if everything is perfect. So they feel like they're sort of like a beta test of the product on some level.
Yeah, no, that was actually what you answered my other question, which was going to be, is there a point where you just say, I've stopped?
Yeah.
And I guess that's what you do.
You have to.
You have
yeah.
to, because it can keep going. It's just like a painting. I guess you look at it and you say, no, I'm
Just
done.
one more tweak.
Let's go to the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. So I'm not going to assume, but is the gaming industry or what you do, aside from illustration, do you find that the creation of games and that type of industry is more male dominated?
Definitely traditionally, yes. I think the image we have of someone who loves Dungeons and Dragons isn't that different from the image we had of someone who loves video games a few years ago.
Right.
We sort of expect maybe an 18 to 35-year-old man, probably white, probably straight. But much like video games and comics and so many other fields right now, that entire industry is diversifying. A lot of people are coming in and figuring out how to make things on their own without needing like big company support because of the internet. And so I'm seeing these wonderful communities designed to serve people who don't fit that stereotype so that we can have a more diverse and, on a lot of levels, a safer like industry to make things in.
So how would you encourage someone who wants to get into this to do what you do, starting from the beginning with the illustration into creating their own? What do they need to do that?
I think there's sort of two angles. You can focus on becoming a good artist, which is somebody who feels confident in their skills. I'm not really going to tell you what that looks like because art is so incredibly varied.
Yes.
But if you feel confident in the sort of work that you make, then you can start challenging yourself to take on those extra parts that come with trying to self-publish a whole adventure. But I think trusting your gut is really important, right? If you enjoy drawing maps, draw maps. If you enjoy drawing characters, draw all of the non-player characters. Mm-hmm. If you would rather sort of do a mind map and write things out, definitely go that way. I see a lot of folks come into making games and making adventures through the writing field, where they come up and they start writing stories and then they figure out how to add art, whether they're using stock art or they're getting into sort of making their own art for the first time.
Right.
And the art is sort of the new skill they're acquiring to accompany their writing skills. So I think whatever your strength is, start with that and then pick up whatever you need to put it all together.
And they don't have to start with anything big. It could be something very, very simple. And then as they get more comfortable with it, then add to it or expand on it. And
absolutely.
Sort of like what you did with adding what you do to the Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
Right? The expansion parts.
If anyone's curious, there was an event on Kickstarter in February called Zine Quest that was targeted towards focusing on Kickstarters that were role-playing game zines. So small, black and white, staple-bound adventures or other sorts of things. Sometimes an entire game in a zine. So if you take a look at that, you'll see a wonderful list of all these different projects that show you kind of the variety of small, achievable, small team or single person event like products and adventures.
Oh. So what's new for you? What's coming up?
The next thing I've got to do is prepare for TCAF. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking forward to TCAF. The Comic Book Embassy, as a studio full of people who make comics, we sort of just hunker down for April, and I've got several studio mates exhibiting, and so we're all going to get ready. I'm also looking forward to running more programming with this group in Toronto named Danes Making Games. Mm-hmm. We did some wonderful programming last year and into the new year, working with tabletop role-playing games, running game jams, and the community there is so supportive and excited that I'm really just sort of making a list and asking them what they want next. That's my next step.
That's nice. And that's in Toronto.
That is. They are running out of the Toronto Media Arts Centre, TMAC, down on Lisgar Street. And it's a community for non-binary, femme, two-spirited, trans, and cis women, centered around them to help them get into games, make games, enjoy games, critique games. It's just an incredible creative community.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you're earlier, before we went on camera, that you're going to be participating in an event this evening.
I am. So I had the good luck to get involved with an alternative school in Toronto called the Oasis Skateboard Factory. Mm-hmm. And I just wrapped up a 5-week comic making workshop with them and their students. And so the students are having a big art show tonight at the Gladstone Hotel, and I want to go see their art. And I also painted a skateboard to donate to them for fundraising.
Yeah, that's really nice.
So I'm gonna go high five them all. I'm so excited to see all of the comics together in one package.
Oh, that's great. That's really great. And actually, I had one more question because I did see that you were also involved with the Shel Kahn Museum. You did some workshops with them?
I did. We did a prototype Dungeons and Dragons workshop.
Okay.
I don't think it ended up sort of fitting the structure of their summer camp as well as we'd hoped, but it was an incredible
Sounds
blast.
interesting.
It was really fun. I ran a sort of simpler game, a little bit easier for younger kids to pick up, called Dungeon World. And I sort of hacked it so that we could use the game to tell the story of the Shahnameh, which is a 1,000-year-old epic poem that sort of encompasses the history of pre-Islamic Persia.
Mm-hmm.
And we wanted to use this as a teaching tool to help the kids get interested in and passionate about specifically the story of Rostrum, one of their core, like, important iconic heroes. So we reskinned the whole Dungeon World setting. I trained 3 other sort of facilitators to run Dungeon World, and we had an amazing 1-week program that was so intense.
Well, that sounds like something I may want to take one day.
It was so much fun. So I don't know if it's going to be something that we'll see at the Shel Kahn again, but it was inspired by the ongoing, like, 30 years maybe of Dungeons and Dragons programming that happens at the Royal Ontario Museum.
Okay.
That my friend Daniel Kwan has been involved in for a decade or more. And so he actually helped me put together something for the Shel Kahn.
Oh, wasn't that nice?
Yeah, it was
that's great.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're good for today. I wanted to thank Shel for coming in. It's been a great experience, and I'd like to have you back. We can talk about some other areas of what you do, other things that you do, maybe more about the comic book embassy.
Yeah.
And my name is Jacqueline, and it's Gortson's Art Supplies. And thanks for watching.
Thank
We'll
you
see
very
again.
much.
Thank you.
Cheers.